many great American authors, but my favorite is F. Scott Fitzgerald. As you can tell by the condition of my copy of The Great Gatsby, I may have read it once or twice. Although it can be perfectly fine to dive into a novel without knowing the author or any background information about the time period, I personally believe that it can add a whole new dimension to a reader's understanding of the text. So in order to prepare you to dive into Fitzgerald's novels, I'm going to give you some information on his background and of the time period and what was going on in the 1920s, which is when The Great Gatsby was written. Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald was born in St. Paul, Minnesota on September 24, 1896. He was named after the author of the national anthem, who was a distant cousin of his on his father's side. His father's name was Edward, and he was from Maryland. He had strong roots to the Old South and his values. His mother's name was Molly, and she was the daughter of an Irish immigrant who owned successful grocery stores. Both of his parents were Catholic. Edward tried making a living manufacturing wicker furniture, but failed. He then tried his hand at being a salesman for Procter & Gamble in New York, but this didn't work out either. The Fitzgeralds returned to St. Paul in 1908 and lived comfortably off Mrs. Fitzgerald's inheritance. Fitzgerald attended St. Paul Academy. This is where his first piece of writing appeared in print. At 13 years old, he wrote a detective story for the school newspaper. He then attended the Newman School from 1911 to 1913. This was a college prep school in New Jersey. After this, he went to Princeton and decided to focus on his writing rather than academics. He was placed on academic probation and ended up never graduating. Fitzgerald joined the Army in 1917. He was afraid that he may die, so he started writing The Romantic Egotist. When he sent it into an editor, it was rejected. But the editor gave him some hope. He told him to revise it and resend it. In June of 1918, he was assigned to a station near Montgomery, Alabama. This is where Fitzgerald fell in love. He met 18-year-old Zelda Sayre, the youngest daughter of an Alabama Supreme Court judge. They fell in love, wrote lots of letters, and became engaged. Fitzgerald resubmitted The Romantic Egotist, but it was again rejected. He was discharged from the Army in 1919 after the war ended. Fitzgerald decided to go to New York City to make money so that he could marry Zelda, but she ended up breaking off their engagement because of his shaky job in advertising and his general lack of money. In the summer of 1919, Fitzgerald quit his job in New York, returned to St. Paul, and rewrote The Romantic Egotist, except this time he called it This Side of Paradise. This Side of Paradise was accepted that fall. It was published on March 26, 1920. At 24 years old, Fitzgerald was suddenly looking like a promising young writer. A week later, he married Zelda in New York. After writing his second novel, The Beautiful and the Damned, the Fitzgeralds spent most of the early 20s going everywhere. They took a trip to Europe in 1921, then went back to St. Paul to have their only child, a daughter named Scotty, and they moved back to New York, then to France in 1924. It was also during this time that Fitzgerald started writing numerous short stories in order to keep up with their lavish lifestyle. This is also when his drinking started to steadily increase. In France, Fitzgerald started writing The Great Gatsby, which was published in April of 1925. He met Ernest Hemingway while in Paris, and they formed a close friendship. The Fitzgeralds became known for their incessant partying, their unconventional way of life, and their unstable relationship. 1930 marked the start of Zelda's regular stays at hospitals for mental and physical breakdowns. In 1936, he wrote that he was hopelessly in debt, unable to write, nearly estranged from his wife and daughter, and incapacitated by excessive drinking and poor physical health. In 1937, things started to look up a bit when he moved to Hollywood to do some movie writing. He fell in love with Sheila Graham, a movie columnist there, and they moved in together. On December 24, 1940, Fitzgerald died of a heart attack at 44 years old. The Love of the Last Tycoon was his last novel, but he died before he could finish it. His notes on the ending are included in the novel today. end, Fitzgerald was very similar to the 1920s. At the beginning, he was young, fresh, and living the life. At his end, he was consumed by alcoholism.